Hi everyone, welcome to Know Thine Enemy. I'm Walt, and like you, I'm a bad Commander player. But you're in luck, because I have tracked down the people that I lose to, and I'm going to work out how to be a better player by interviewing them. Every week, I'll be chatting to somebody different and trying to get to the heart of how they build their decks and how they play their decks. This week, I'm joined by Aaron. Aaron, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Aaron. I'm part of the Commander community and a general committee member. Nice to see you.
You too, Aaron. We can see each other. There will be no video, unfortunately, but we're doing this remotely, so this is the best we can do. All right, Aaron. Nice, easy one to start us off. Think of the last game of Commander that you won. Was your deck building or deck piloting more important? And what percentage do you think each contributed?
Well, the last one that I won was part of the Commander League, and we had a normal Commander paired with a class card from the D&D set, and I was doing Lavinia, the Azurus Renegade, and Bard class. And when it came down to building the deck, it was all around that level 2 ability, which reduces the cost of legendary permanents by a red and a green. So I took that and I ran away with it. And I was just focusing mainly on that.
Cool. And do you reckon with that deck, that last win that you had, if you're thinking about how that win came about, do you think that was mostly that the deck planning, like all the planning that you'd done to build the deck in the first place, or do you think there was sort of a sequence of plays on the night that ultimately gave you the win?
Well, for this deck, it's always about the sequence of plays. So, as much as it's always going to be turn 1 or 2, you get your commander out or you get the class out, and then the next turn it's level up so that you've got that reduced discount. I guess it's based around just building the deck. So I'm always going to be able to play legendary creatures for far cheaper than what other people are able to do. And I've got to make sure that I'm always going to be able to hit those land drops so I can constantly level it up, the class card.
So with this particular game that you played, how did you win? Did you win with combat damage, or was it some hectic infinite combo, or like what was the ultimate sort of win con of that deck?
It's wonderful. It was combat damage. So when you get to the final level of the Bard class, you basically get to exile the next 2 cards after you play a legendary legendary creature. And the deck is revolved around the legendary creatures, so I was just chaining legendary creature into legendary creature, exiling more cards off the top, and just growing this huge board of powerful legendary creatures that are costing so much less than just swinging in for lethal damage all the time.
Cool. We'll definitely include a link to the deck list for this particular build. I had a look at it the other day, and it's pretty fun. It's not the direction that I would have thought to go with that particular combination. I guess I should explain. This is for a league event that we it's sort of a trial event that we were running as the committee, which is where we gave people the opportunity to play a commander deck that was not in the colors that you would normally have access to. So, for instance, I built a Safara Sky's Blade flying deck. So Safara is a white creature. So normally in Commander, if you were to build that deck, it would have to be a mono white deck. But I paired that, like we had the opportunity to pair it with one of the class cards from the latest D&D set. So I paired mine with Monk class. So I got to use all those fantastic blue and white cards that pump your flying creatures and that sort of thing. And make a flying deck. I might include a link to that deck list as well. It's really good fun, that one. Aaron went for the Bard class, and with Lavinia, Azorius Renegade. Was it that one? Each player can't cast spells greater than the number of lands they control. It's that one, isn't it?
Yeah, and if they cast something for free, it's counted.
Yeah, that's right. That card is brutal. Anyway, it's so interesting. I saw the combination. I was like, what is this? And then Aaron sent through the deck list, and it's all it's basically almost exclusively just legendary creatures that have a red pip and a green pip in the mana cost. Because on that second level of Bard class, which I hope we can have up on the screen right now, you'll see that it actually reduces the mana cost. So he basically is churning out these enormous, terrifying, mostly red and green legendary creatures kind of every turn. And then when he gets to, yeah, like he was saying before, when he gets to level 3, suddenly he's turning all those creatures into this card advantage. Yeah, really cool. Really cool. So I guess I'm interested now in how you actually put together that deck, because I've heard lots of different strategies people have for building commander decks. And it sort of ties into a question that I have here actually, which is that, do you have any deck building rules that you never break when you're building a commander deck?
Well, I've been playing for an enormous amount of years now. So at the start, I would always make sure that I've got X amount of lands or this many ramp spells. But now, because I've been playing so long, I can bend those rules quite significantly. So, depending on the deck I want to build, I'll try and focus around a certain aspect. So I've got like my clone deck. Like, I wanted to make a deck where I could sit down at any table and just do what the table's doing and be somewhat equivalent in power level. So I was like, okay, how can I make a deck that will just copy everything on the board? And I just focused around that, built it up, and I was like, do I need ramp spells for that? Not necessarily, because other people might be playing mana dorks that are far better than any ramp spell I could have. So why not just copy that instead of wasting my time ramping up myself? Same with like Vesuva, which is a land that can copy another land. There's like, oh, someone's got a mana crypt out, or no, not a mana crypt. What is it? Mana Vault? The land one? Ancient Tomb?
Ancient Tomb, yeah.
Yeah, someone's got an Ancient Tomb out, or a dual guild land that bounces another land. I'll just make a copy of that. There's my ramp.
Yeah. It's a really cool deck, that one as well, actually. And it's interesting you say that about bending the rules. I remember when I was studying Kung Fu, there was this sort of idea that when you're starting out, there are these like extremely rigid restrictions regarding, you know, how you move and how you're supposed to use, you know, someone's weight against them, and, you know, the sort of things we often see in martial arts movies, I suppose. But, you know, like there was really stringent rules to guide you, and then increasingly as you would get more and more advanced, they would encourage you to let go of the rules. And I found it really difficult to rectify in my head, but I'm finding like, yeah, with Commander, it's almost a similar kind of thing where, you know, you start out and someone says, oh, always have 37 lands in your deck, or always have 10 ramp spells. And I think it's a good place to start. But as you go along, you sort of find that you start to learn why people have that advice. And so you know when to break those rules. Actually, yeah, I don't have this written down, but this is sort of something I'd be interested to probe your brain about. What's the kind of weirdest, like furthest you've deviated from one of those rules? Like, is there a deck that you have that runs no ramp or something? Like, what's the kind of deck you think? I'm guessing it's going to be this clone one, but which of your decks do you think deviates so like furthest from the usual sort of conventions around deck building?
That's a good question. I've got a few in my mind. My Kalia of the Vast deck that I've got probably runs far fewer lands and ramp than what a deck with those huge Angels, Demons, and Dragon bombs should. But the reason that I've been able to do that is because a lot of the Angels, Demons, and Dragons that are in there will allow me to either tutor up more Angels, Demons, Dragons to just cheat into the battlefield from Kalia's ability, or protect Kalia herself. So it's really a tempo. You go turn 1, land, turn 2, land, turn 3, land, turn 4, land Kalia, or you go like Lightning Greaves to protect her when she comes down and swing. And then you've got like a Avacyn on the battlefield to protect everything and make it all indestructible. So you don't really need as much ramp in that sort of a deck where you can just quickly cheat out all this stuff.
Well, Kalia makes some of those things free, which is just crazy. Like sometimes you see someone drop, it's turn 4, particularly if they have got the Greaves out, and someone casts Kalia, and so she's got haste and she's protected, and they drop, like one of those demons that costs like 9 mana. And you're kind of like, what? This is cheating. This does not seem like it should be allowed. But it is, because it's Commander. That's how it works.
Yeah, Runescar Demon is also a really good one that you can get, because it's basically, it ETBs, and then you get to tutor for something else. So it's like, that turn's play is all set, and the next turn's play is all set. So it gets really spooky on turn 4-5.
It definitely does. And Runescar Demon is one of those black tutors where you don't even see the card they grab, which is so much scarier. Like, when someone casts a demonic tutor, vampiric tutor, whatever, you're kind of like, like you're looking at their board, you're looking at their commander, and you're kind of like, what are they grabbing? What's completing their little engine here that we need to be scared of? My next question for you, Aaron, to move away from being positive for a moment. What do you think is the worst habit you can have as a Magic player?
Probably not knowing when you've had enough Magic for the day. Now, you might be there to play the games and enjoy yourself, but like, people get fatigued later on in the day, and that's usually when we're in at the store, and your ability to control your emotions is diminished. So you're like there playing and you might be really salty. It's something that I was doing and I'm working on myself, is like recognizing when I'm like, okay, I've had enough of like Magic for today. I'm happy to just chill, but like putting in that mental effort is something that I've been, getting a bit more aware of. What about yourself?
Oh, I mean, I definitely empathize with that. With the fatigue setting in. I think it's a similar sort of thing, which is not putting too much value on the game. Just sometimes it's good to take a few breaths and just remind yourself you're just playing for fun. If you don't win, it's not the end of the world, kind of thing. Because I think particularly, when it's late and you've been playing a lot of games in a row, and particularly if you've lost a few in a row, you start going like, what am I doing? And I'm making all these mistakes, and you just kind of take a step back and go, that's right, I'm just having fun. I'm supposed to be having fun.
Yeah.
I find a good way to break out of that is just to talk to the table. It often means you're getting so absorbed in your own cards and your own plays that's what's making you make mistakes. So sometimes it's good to just kind of chill out, and I think the best way to do that is just chat to people. Ask people about their decks, ask people what they're doing. Someone plays a big threat card, don't immediately look at your hand, go, wow, that's a threat. And like ask people at the table, do you have a response for that? That's a huge issue for us. Because sometimes you can trick people into removing something that you want to remove for you. You don't have to waste your cards on it. Someone else will do it for you.
That's an interesting point. I tend to think that when it comes to threat assessment, we should wait until it's a true threat for us. So something that someone just played might not necessarily be a huge issue immediately, but it's when they start doing stuff with it is when you should answer it. At least in my opinion.
No, I agree with that. I've been dabbling a little bit in some very gentle stacks, which for those people who are slightly newer is sort of cards that stop your opponents from doing stuff, and often stop you as well, but you kind of have ways of getting around it so it doesn't stop you down so much. So like a really good example of something that I play is Deafening Silence. Each player can't cast more than one non-creature spell per turn. So if you have a way of getting things onto the battlefield without casting them, or if your deck is full of creatures, suddenly you've got a card that's slowing down your opponents pretty substantially, but is kind of having almost no effect whatsoever on your own gameplay. Anyway, and I find that people sometimes, because stacks is so unpopular just as an idea, they kind of have this real aversion where they go, oh crap, that card is so mean, I have to get rid of it. But they don't sort of stop and take a moment and think, how much is this actually slowing me down? Like I played it the other day and someone was like, oh, I should really remove that. And then it got to their turn and they realized that their deck was full of creatures. And they were kind of like, oh, I can kind of leave this. Like, if this is slowing down my opponents more than it's slowing down me, then maybe I should actually leave that on the table. But a lot of people will see a card like that and go, that has to go. I don't like that. I don't like the idea behind that. And I kind of find it more fun when you sort of start going, it starts feeling like a puzzle then, the game, where you kind of go, what's my main priority here? Not like, what's scary for everyone, but like, what's stopping me from winning? And equally, what's stopping my opponents from winning? Because sometimes it's worth leaving something if it means that, your next player is not going to win. I know it's a very try-hard way of playing, but I just think it's fun. It just makes it a bit more depth to the gameplay then, I think. Actually, speaking of, that might sort of tie into my next one here, Aaron, which is about synergy. So I've been trying to think of questions for each of the people I want to interview on this show, and I've been trying to sort of tailor it to the people who I'm talking to, and thinking about the sorts of decks they build. And I was sort of thinking about your decks, Aaron, and I've noticed that there's a particular sort of synergy that your decks have in common, and it's a very focused and a very specific and a very direct kind of synergy that says, yeah, I want to use these 3 cards and make something interesting happen with them. So I was wondering, when you are creating a deck that is synergistic, is there any sort of formula that you're using or sort of strategy you're employing when you're thinking about what cards to use and what cards not to?
Yeah, sort of. I tend to focus, like, let's take my league deck, which is an enormous amount of lands, which is 51. The class, which is the Bard, and then Lavinia. I started out with, what class do I want? And how do I build synergy around it? And I was like, Bard class looks really cool. Okay, so I know that red-green is mainly stompy stuff and ramp. I was like, okay, so I can do the stompy stuff, but how do I protect myself up until that point? I was like, okay, maybe I can slow down my opponents a little bit by playing Lavinia, the Azura's Renegade. Both are really cheap, 2 mana each, and it opens up green-blue, which was like, okay, sweet, I can put in the Simic package of like land ramp, AC, Tadiova, and the plus side is they get their green pips reduced by the class card. Like, okay, sweet. So I've got reduced cost on these things that are going to be churning through my deck even more. And when I first showed it, everyone's like, why do you have so many lands in here? I was like, the Simic land package is pretty strong. So if I hit any of those and I get like a Sousa and I'm playing 3 or 4 lands per turn, I'm just drawing 3 or 4 more cards. So I was like, okay, so now we've got ramp, we've got card draw, and we've got a little bit of protection, but let's lean more onto the protection side. Ghostly Prison, Propaganda, and I threw a little bit of spice in, which was Enchanted Evening and Sphere of Safety. So Enchanted Evening is everything becomes an enchantment in addition to its other types. And then Sphere of Safety is the opponent must pay X, where X is the amount of enchantments you have, to attack you with 1 creature. So it puts a huge stop on their plan to swing in with like a bunch of little creatures. And it's just solid protection.
It's so interesting. I remember noticing because I had a look at the deck list, and I remember noticing Enchanted Evening in there, and my first thought was that you were going to run like Sterling Grove, or one of those one of those cards that gives your enchantments Shroud. And I was thinking like, oh, he wants to make everything, untouchable or whatever. But that's so much more interesting, the sphere of safety route of going, just people can't attack me. And I didn't realize, I didn't see Aesi and Tatiova. Did you say Tatiova as well? Yeah. That I didn't realize those were in the deck as well, because suddenly that I didn't think about that. Yeah, with 51 lands in your deck, you just churn them out and hope for the best, I guess.
It turns into life gain and card draw. So every land would be 2 draws of a card and 2 life.
That's so cool. Yeah. I haven't played against this deck before, but now I kind of want to. It sounds very sounds very, very interesting. So I guess I think if I can sort of probe you a bit more about this synergy thing, I'm sort of thinking about some of the earliest decks I tried to build that had synergy in them, and how a lot of the time I would end up with all of these cards that the command zone would call enhancers. Cards that make your synergies work better, but do not themselves do much. I'm thinking of cards like Anointed Procession, which makes twice as many tokens. Awesome card, but if you're not already making tokens, Anointed Procession doesn't do anything. And I think a lot of my earlier decks, I had so many of those cards that, an enhancer, and I sort of was finding that I would have this amazing state where I'd kind of go, oh, if I can just make some tokens, I'll make so many. But I wasn't making any tokens. I'm sort of wondering because I'm sure you're aware, I can see you nodding when I'm saying all of this. I'm wondering what sort of strategies you kind of employ in your thinking to avoid that sort of situation of having all of the value stuff and none of the stuff that's making value, if that makes sense.
So when it comes down to those really powerful enhancers, sometimes you just got to cut them when you don't want to cut them. And the way that you would do that is you go through and you start thinking, how much does this further my game plan? Does this help me as much as what I want it to? So I've got an Thanatos, the Warweaver deck, and one of its sub-themes is to have a bunch of tokens out for the opponents, so that they have to swing, and then I can block and get a lot of advantage off it. So a lot of people would be like, okay, Doubling Season and Parallel Lives, Anointed Procession, even though Anointed Procession can't be in that deck, would be really solid for that deck. I was like, well, not really, because that's only going to give me a bunch of tokens. I want to give my opponents a bunch of 1/1 sack rollings that have to die. So Primal Vigor, which is if one or more tokens will be put onto the battlefield, you put twice as many, and same with 1/1 counters. But that goes for everyone. And that promotes people doing some pretty weird things when they're forced to attack. So choosing what furthers your game plan, as well as creates a synergy, is the way that I think of it. And sometimes I'll cut cards that might look really powerful, but don't do as much as I want in the deck.
The other thing I was when I was thinking about, thanks for your answer, that was really good, by the way. The other thing I was thinking about when I was thinking about you and what I think, I was sort of trying to get the essence of Aaron, if you like, down to it. And after Synergy, the thing that popped into my mind was, I think you tinker with your decks possibly more than almost anyone else at the store. But and the way that I know that is when you're building a deck, you say, hey guys, I'm building this deck. Do you have anything that you think would be cool in it? Or like, here's a list of cards that I want. And then you just come into the store and every week you're trying that deck and you're like refining it. Like if I'm contrasting that to someone like me, where I bring in like 3 decks one week and then that's 3 completely different decks the next, you often play like one deck, and I feel as though, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but you're playing that deck until you're happy with it. And you're taking cards out and adding cards until you feel it's, quotation marks, done. What kinds of thoughts are going through your mind when you're making these sorts of cuts and adjustments to a deck, and what are the sorts of things you're looking for when you're playing to see, what needs to come out, what needs to come in?
So when I start making a deck, I build up the basis of what I think would be really good. And I'm like, okay, this is a solid theme. Like a solid idea. I can create this and I can play this. So when I go into the store and I sit down at the table and I play it over and over again, it's to find those weaknesses. So I don't go in with the mindset of, I'm going to win. I go in with the mindset of, what is beating me and how can I make that mitigated or as less impactful to me as possible. So I was playing the forced combat deck, and it's still not quite where I want it to be. But because I realized that playing the commander, which forces the combat early, isn't working as well, it changes the way that my strategy works as well when I'm playing. It's all about how you play, what the weaknesses for the deck are, and how to improve. Because every deck can play at a different speed, every deck could have like more powerful turns at certain times, and I was quickly finding out that just going hyper aggressive with a combat deck isn't what you want, which was weird to me.
It is interesting how often, even when you're playing a deck that is, in quotation marks, aggro, and this is sort of coming more from the terminology that they use in standard and limited and that kind of thing, which is that, a deck is aggro if it's trying to sort of win before your opponent can set up, combo if it's sort of trying to wait around, and sort of mid-range or tempo if it's somewhere in the middle. An aggro deck in Commander, funnily enough, often wants to wait.
Yeah.
It's so strange. You sort of think, I'm playing this combat damage based deck, I'd better just attack whenever I can. But you sort of often run into this problem where people, if you just keep attacking people, they will try and kill you.
Yeah.
There's like, even if you're not very close to a win, just little attacks all the time will get on someone's nerves, and they will actively try to eliminate you from the game. So yeah, even if you're playing a deck like a Krenko Mob Boss deck, you often have to wait and sort of pick your big swing later in the game that might eliminate 1 or 2 players, as opposed to like sort of pinging down one at a time. So I'm interested in what you're talking about before, about thinking about how your deck loses. That's not something I think I've ever thought about. I guess I'm somewhat aware of sometimes, some of the ways, but I don't think I could give you a list. If you said, oh well, your Ishtakik and Rebek Golem deck, how does that deck usually lose? I don't think I could really give you, list the ways. Could you give an example of maybe one of your decks and a way that you identified that it loses, and then if you can, and I know this might be a bit of a big ask, but a card that you put in to sort of rectify that issue that you were finding you were having with the deck?
We could go with like the theme of like a commander centric deck, like my clone deck. If I don't really keep Sakashima of 1,000 Faces on board, all the legendary creatures that I've copied just sacrificed, and that's a whole bunch of value that just goes down the drain just because they remove one creature. To mitigate that, I would copy a legendary creature and then copy the Sakashima copy, so I gain multiple copies of the legendary rule, so that even though you get rid of one, you're not necessarily going to be able to get rid of the other. And then like swapping one of them into an indestructible creature or something like that is really solid. I also cut one of the more powerful copy spells in there for a true polymorph, because I was running low on removal. So the flexibility of true polymorph is you can have a target creature or artifact become a copy of another target creature or artifact. So if I wanted a really powerful thing, I can turn one of the thralls that I make with Tevisat into a really powerful creature. Or if I'm terrified of a commander, I can turn that commander into like an indestructible land that is an artifact, or a soul ring, and remove that from worry.
Wow, that's so interesting. What does True Polymorph do? So I'm aware that we'll probably have the cards on the screen, but just for the purpose of discussion, I don't think I've ever seen True Polymorph before. Can you just what does it read?
I'll have to get it out.
Yeah, no, I'll give you a moment.
So True Polymorph says, target artifact or creature becomes a copy of another target artifact or creature.
Wow.
And that's it. It's an instant speed, 6 mana, 4 generic, 2 blue, just to transform something permanently. So, for example, if you have like a certain Niv Mizzet that's being a bit of a pest, just transform him into a artifact land that has indestructible. He can't do anything anymore.
That, for those who are unaware, is a very targeted comment about our good friend James, who's the president of our committee. His Niv Mizzet Perun deck. Anyone who's played a Niv Mizzet Perun deck, I'm sure can attest to how bloody annoying that creature is. And so yes, that's I quite like that that idea that you could permanently remove that. It's all right. Now it is getting on a bit for time, Aaron. So I have a few rapid fire questions, if you will. So sort of would love, not one word, maybe one sentence answers to each of these. And if you say something really interesting, I might probe you about it afterwards. But we'll go through the questions first. Okay. What is the most important turn of the game? This is Commander.
The starting turns, simply because they're where you can develop your land base.
Most overrated Commander card.
That's really tricky. I'm not 100% sure there is a hugely overrated one. I would probably say Reliquary Tower. A lot of people run it just because it gives them no maximum hand size, but it doesn't really further their game plan.
Most underrated Commander card.
I don't think... Excellent question. I don't really think of overrated versus underrated. I tend to think of what works in certain scenarios.
Interesting. Maybe instead of that then, a card that is very good in one of your decks that is not usually very good, so subsequently people wouldn't think it's very good. Can you think of an example of that?
Yeah, there's, again in my league deck, there's this guy, he's a legendary creature, and he costs 5 mana, 3 generic, and a red and a green. And all he does is he says, tap him to create 2 generic mana, and he's like a 5/4. So he's a really expensive mana dork, and he would not go anywhere else but that deck. Simply because he is a legendary creature and he turns into a 3 mana.
That's so funny.
5.
He basically becomes, what's that artifact? The 3 mana enters tapped, taps for 2 colorless. I've blanked on it.
Like Basalt Monolith, is it?
No, there's one I run in. I'll send it to you afterwards. You can have it up on the screen right now. But there's a 3 mana artifact that enters tapped and taps for 2 colorless, and in that deck you get it on a creature that's also a 5/4. It's so funny. That is so interesting. I've got to be completely honest with you. When they spoiled Bard class, I was like, well, this one sucks. Like, of all of them, I was like, nah, sorry, this one is so bad. No one's going to find a use for it. And then, you sent me that deck list, and I was like, how are there so many, like, legendary creatures that have red-green in the mana cost? So you actually get, like, a really good discount. it kind of blows you away the first time you see it. You're like, oh my god, and like they're not bad either. Like, you know, that one's pretty silly. Like, but it's still it's a 3 mana taps for 2 colorless mana dork. Like, it's not a bad card.
Yeah, well, when it comes to like Nick McInnes, he has Atla Palani, and Atla Palani's in the league deck that I have, and instead of being a 4 mana 2/3, when I cast her, she's a 2 mana 3/4.
Oh, because they all enter with an extra. It's so silly. It's so silly. It's just ludicrous. In the interest of improving more, which is sort of the whole goal of this little podcast. Like, I sort of want people to have some strategies for playing better Commander games and for being better at Commander, I guess. What do you think you could improve on as a Commander player? And is there someone in particular who you think, you know, is perhaps better than you at this particular thing that you could learn from?
I tend to get overconfident towards the end of the game. And there have been many times where I think that I can win the game, and I just go, okay, I swing with everything, and then I settle the wreckage is waiting around the corner for me. So I lose everything. So I think that having patience and only doing as much as needed is something that I should work on. But it's so fun to turn your whole board sideways.
You're preaching to the converted there, Aaron. I couldn't agree more. Especially when you do think you have it, you kind of go like, yeah, you don't hold back. You go, oh, I'll attack with everything. And yeah, look, I'm defending you because I make the same mistake. But in my mind, I also think like sometimes if you attack with exactly, you know, lethal damage, someone can remove one creature and then suddenly it's not lethal anymore. But yeah, well, Nick. Speaking of Nick plays Settle the Wreckage and loves Settle the Wreckage, and oh man, it never ceases to be infuriating, that card, when you attack with everything. Though it makes your next turn pretty cool with all the lands that you get.
Ramp.
All right, and final note: is there any other content that you would like to plug?
Yeah, Commanders of the Community. Massive fan. If you guys want to be a part of it, just shoot me a message.
That is specifically for members of our community, but they are available on this YouTube channel, or they should be. So if you feel like having a look at some of the, I think well, I'm not sure at this point, whenever this video is published, how many are out and about, but there should be at least one. And I think it's your deck actually that has been already posted. So yeah, if you want to know more about Aaron's Sakashima clone deck, which he was talking about earlier, definitely go check that out. It's a very fun deck to play against, and I imagine it's very good fun to play as well. Aaron, for you seem to have a blast whenever I see you play that deck.
Very complicated though.
Yes, I can imagine. Well, thanks so much for joining me, Aaron, and yeah, I look forward to seeing you hopefully in person sometime soon, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right. That's all, guys. Have a good one, and we'll see you the next time.